Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
That's right, Kevin O'Connell. Time to run through walls because football season is here. The regular season is just about here. And that's not even the start of it. The fact of the matter is, it's Thorsday. It's Thorsday. Mackey's still out. Who needs him? Zolgad, Declan, and our guy, Thor Nystrom of the college football and NFL draft analyst for Matthew Berry's The Fantasy Life. Thor, welcome to the day that is now named after you with an awesome new backdrop with one of the great catches in Vikings history.
Look at
the
that.
top of the wall.
Yeah, good to be back. I've spent a lot of time in the office making this play behind me. And now I got an NFL one. I got the college football helmets across the way. I'm ready to go for the season.
God, that's beautiful.
Look at those.
That's
Look at all
beautiful.
those, man.
Now, do you have to pay for all of the helmets?
The helmets, yes. I was lucky enough where New Era, who's a partner with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, they sent me the hats, which are get a little bit lower.
Yeah,
there.
the hats are cool.
Oh, yeah, look at those.
But those helmets, if I'm not mistaken, are not cheap, and they are really cool. So that's a great backdrop.
Yeah,
Love it. Love it. All right, let's start the show by talking about, and I think this is actually one of the great preseason stories for the Vikings because it popped up in the Cleveland game. That was the second preseason game. The Vikings, obviously, third and final exhibition, Philadelphia at Philadelphia on Saturday. But let's talk about 2022 first-round pick Lewis Cine, who played, let's get this clear, if you don't know, you probably do, every defensive snap against the Browns, 12 or 13 special team snaps, had a marvelous game, was all over the place. Basically, it felt like they said, don't worry about the scheme, you just go Cine. And Cine's like, okay, got a sack, got a pick, 11 tackles. Thor, what is your take? I'll reserve mine because I've talked about this. I want to know what you think about this late pop-up for Lewis Cine.
It's a very good sign. This was a guy I even put this out on Twitter last week before the game, where I was praying that Lewis Cine would do anything in the Browns game in order to become a tradable asset again. Yep. And he looked so good that now he has trade value. I don't know that I want to trade him, especially with the safety situation as it is. We talked last week about how we're going to see 3 safeties on the field, 4 safeties on the field. Harry the Hitman's future. Lewis Cine starting to look like, in that game, he looked like he did at Georgia. He was a very interesting prospect coming in. Of course, the rookie season deprived of him from the injury. Took him a long time to get back from that. But I was looking through my collegiate scouting report on him when he came into the draft process. People need to keep in mind the canvas that we're playing with here. Over 6'2", over 200 pounds, 99th percentile athlete. He was 11th in PFF grade as a safety his last year, but top 16 in coverage grade, tackling grade, and PFF run defense. This is a forward charging player who does not play as well with his back to the ball. But when he's coming downhill, that guy is a problem. And that's what you saw in the Cleveland game. Crashing down on the catch points and jarring the ball loose. He smoked that the one dude, sent him into the shadow realm on one of the hits. Lewis Cine is a violent player. I mean, just ask Kyle Pitts, who he knocked out when they were at Florida and Georgia, respectively. Yep. But a 2-year starting safety on those vaunted Georgia defenses was Lewis Cine. And the thing of him coming downhill, it was like a Dick Night Train lane when he was in the SEC, a throwback type game. But you just have to know the kind of player he is. But the fit and floor as a system, if he is healthy and 100% and ready, I mean, that's all indications, and that's certainly what he looked. And Lewis Cine told reporters afterwards, a healthy me is a dangerous me. I totally agree with that. And a well-deployed Lewis Cine is also a dangerous proposition for offenses. If you're only having him charge downhill, that's what he's good at. He sees the panorama of the whole field, makes his decision, has the immediate trigger. And this guy's an athletic freak. I mean, it's not just that decision-making process, but 98th percentile broad jump coming out, 99th percentile 40. He ran a 4.37. And 99th percentile, both 10-yard and 20-yard splits. You wonder how he gets there so fast. He sees the whole thing, and the second he crashes down, he's got a jetpack on his back, and he's coming with violent intentions. This is an interesting player. It's great to see him back at full health, and now I sort of want to keep him now that he's a trade asset.
So if he does make the 53, let's say he's not traded, Thor, and he is indeed on the Vikings 53-man roster. Is this a dude that probably starts as special teams and then is just, like your depth safety dude in the event that injuries or ineffectiveness happen? I mean, if he makes the 53, is he even active each week? Like, I guess, how would you kind of see that playing out if he indeed is kept here with the Vikings?
If they don't think he will be, that's when, if I was on their end, then I would consider trading him. But I believe that he will be usable if he is 100% healthy, like we seen in that Cleveland game. Cine didn't play as much special teams in college, so that was probably a learning acclimation for him as well. And of course, the injury as a rookie withheld both of these developmental paths for him. But now that we are seeing him there, I mean, again, that's what he does, is the hard charging thing, and then he goes and sticks someone. So there's no reason he shouldn't be a usable piece on a couple of the special teams units. And then as far as a depth piece, to me, it's not like break glass in case of emergency. This is a guy that you can situationally use in Flores' defense. Again, as long as you're using him in the lane that he should be used in, which is just coming downhill and hitting people.
So here, I'm going to dump the proverbial bucket of cold water, of course, on this because, and this was my question to O'Connell on Monday about his game. Because, well, first of all, he played every snap, which means that they were trying to also showcase him. But Thor, here's my comeback because, physically, I agree that there is a lot to like there. It's why they drafted him. He showed things. If you go back and watch him at Georgia, there are things on tape that are like, oh my God, this guy is what you want in a safety. Now, that being said, look at the safety room. Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, Metellus, and I think the fourth guy is now Jay Ward. He's back at safety, but he can swing to corner, and he is a special teams guy. But all of that being said, my fear with Cine is that he is not a fit for Flores' defense from a mental standpoint, because those three, and Theo Jackson too, but Smith, Bynum, Metellus for sure, and Theo more so, those are PhD safeties, and Cine plays a very reactive type of game. I don't know if Flores thinks he fits in, because it's very clear from the names that I ran through that Flores puts a priority on safeties. I mean, what Metellus is doing, folks, goes so much beyond athletic ability. That's necessary, but the guy is a football savant. So I think that's where there's some reluctance here, because I don't know if they see Cine as a fit from a understanding the schematics. And the last thing, Thorsky, is Saturday they told him go out and play. I don't think they were playing anything close. They didn't ask him to do anything close to what Flores wants from his safeties in a regular season game. That's my opinion of this whole thing.
I don't necessarily disagree, but it's keeping, understanding what Lewis Cine's game is and not asking him to expand that, and not asking him to do things that he can't do. I think is Judd, as far as being a multifaceted safety where, you can not only ball hawk in the back end, but if you're the last line of defense, now you're running down the field with a receiver and when to get your head back and swat the ball out. He's not going to do all that different stuff. But if you just understand the kind of player he is, I do think Flores absolutely can situationally use him, because the downhill attacking thing, that he's one of the best safeties we had seen in that the last several years. It's the rest of it that we're working through, and there's aspects of that he's never going to get to. He will never be a back to the ball kind of a guy. But if it's the crashing downhill thing, let's sneak him up to the line right, like the sack he had. Let's sneak him up to the line right before the snap and have him fly off the edge. Attack. That's that kid's game. Keep him away from the stuff that he can too. But I think Flores can find a role for him.
Anything else on Lewis Cine, Judley, that you want to get into before we maybe go to the UDFAs? The other guys?
No, let's go to it. Let's do it.
All right, Thor, the UDFA class here. We had Ivan Pace last year, who obviously showed up. Gabriel Murphy, who's been banged up and just kind of been missing some time here. Dwight McGlother, he's been a stud. I've loved what I've seen from him. I guess, which UDFAs do you think are kind of tracking to be locks or obviously pushing to be a 53-man roster spot guy?
So I put percentage odds on every UDFA or the relevant ones to make the roster. McGlother leads the list. McGlother 91% for me. Okay. The camp has been great. He's looked awesome in the games. A long corner with big stout build.
Flores.
A Flores guy, exactly.
100%.
Flores wants the corners to mug the receivers off the line. That's McGlothern's game. He did it for 3 years in the SEC at the highest level that we have. And a lot of times it was against wide receiver ones in the SEC who had difficulties getting off the line against him. The one question we had about McGlothern coming in was the athletic testing wasn't the best. But if you just flip it from the in shorts test, running on the track and jumping and all the nonsense, and you flip that to the athleticism, the metrics on the field, on-field athleticism, all of a sudden he becomes a 90th percentile athlete. So it just depends on what you're looking at. And by the way, just a general point, the Vikings have done awesome with these kind of guys the last couple of years of, okay, he didn't test very well. And traditionally, a guy that tests like that at that position would not have a path to become an NFL contributor or a starter. Yep. But the Vikings have done a much better job of looking at the next generation of testing, which is the on-field stuff with the chips and the pads and everything like that. And you can see the acceleration, the speed, the long speed, everything like that. And McGlothern's one of those guys, was a great starter in the SEC. And he's shown that the athletic profile he does have is sufficient to stay in the NFL. I think he makes the roster.
And what makes Flores, in my opinion, and I know it's been a very tough week with all the Tua stuff, and I think there's a chance that he will not get a head coaching job again. But what makes him, Thor, in my opinion, such a good DC is I think he is the driving force to say, I want athletes, but I also want guys that fit a profile and an aptitude of their smarts, right? So like he is definitely like to go back to Josh Metellus, perfect example. 6th round pick, so clearly not a star, not a star, but played at Michigan. And I honestly think probably if he was to tell you the truth, Flores would say when he took the job, he saw Cine in the Metellus role. Because like if Cine was a more instinctive player, like he does a lot of those things, right? But he's not. And so he took a 6th round pick and said, okay, screw it. I'm going to use this guy. They signed him to a contract extension that last year that was now a bargain. So like, I think that's where McGlothern, you see some of the instinctual stuff as well. And at least on the back end and linebacker too, I think Flores puts an absolute priority on, do you understand what I want? Because what I want is fairly difficult to comprehend at times. So I think McGlothern fits right into this, again, sort of smart, instinctive, to use a cliche, heady football player.
Totally agree. I mean, that's what it is. He's a perfect scheme fit. I think Brian Flores has helped out Kwesi and the scouting department as far as the UDFAs that they're looking at trying to get scheme fits. I think that's been super helpful. Brian Flores, you don't think of defensive guys as much like this. Usually we talk about offensive guys like this. He is you used the word savant before. Brian Flores is the mad scientist savant. The different alignments he does, the different looks he gives. Last year, they led the NFL in both dropping 8 and then also the 0 blitzes. I mean, this guy does stuff that other people don't. And, defensively, that's, maybe that'll be his lane going forward. I did think it was a bit unfair of what Tua was saying. You're getting the one side, you're taking it out of context. And it's multiple years later. This is Tua played for Nick Saban, and all of a sudden Brian Flores was too much of a taskmaster for him. Like I wasn't sure about all that, but Brian Flores, obviously an awesome defensive coach.
All right.
Let's go next one up here.
Keep going.
For me, next. Oh, and by the way, I know he wasn't a UDFA. I dropped 94% on Levi Drake Rodriguez, just for people that are interested to make the roster.
He's on my 53.
I think he's getting there. Yeah. I mean, the forward propulsion of that kid with the violence, it's like they need to teach him everything else, right? Like they do. But he has the frame. He has the athletic profile. He has that first step. And he's a difficult proposition for interior linemen because he throws the kitchen sink at you right away. That allows him to dictate the dance. The rest of his development is going to be, can we get counter moves off of that? You already are winning the rep, 2 beats after the snap. can we get the other stuff in there? So if they shut down your initial bull rush forward, now we can flip it to something else. We'll see on that, but the kid absolutely is a ball of clay that's worth developing. He has, the John Randall or the member. Chris
yes. I was waiting for you to say Johnny Randall.
It's those guys with them. You can tell right away, like, oh, this guy will die on the sword, right? And also that game of just getting on top of the dude right away, and then everything goes off that difficult proposition.
He does it in practice too. And we don't have fights now, but that motor is going in drills where a lot of guys are like, okay, I'm done. He's not done. He's never done. So.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you have that frame with the athleticism, with that desire, which that's a real thing on the field, right? Like, so you have to keep him for developmental purposes. I'd be shocked if he didn't make it. All right. The next UDFA I had Bo Richter. I think some people are going to have a higher percentage on this one than me. I have Bo Richter at 43% to make the roster. The splash plays speak for themselves in the preseason. We've seen all the highlights, and that was a function of his game at Air Force as well. He piled up the TFL, piled up the sacks, but a non-traditional edge type player in that he sawed off. And then the other, we've seen the opposite where he gets washed out on run plays. He finds himself on the back on the ground. So you have the really high end reps. You also have ugly reps with him. And we need to get those two things closer or figure out something where he can hold his the point of attack when he's not because he's a downhill guy too. He just wants to come forward. When the reverse Uno card gets played on him, and now you have a 325-pound athletic freak offensive tackle who's bearing down on him. That's when the tides can turn a little bit. Can we figure out how to get him anchored in those type situations? Yep. But I have Richter at 43% right now,
and they've got five guys there to keep. And so I think he is a practice squad project. Like, don't get fooled by the sacks. The preseason sacks are great, but there's work here. And if they had like four guys and it was like a fifth, you're trying to decide between a couple guys, you might protect him. I think, in fact, I think that you're probably being kind, Thor. I think 43%, in my opinion, is high. I think he's a clear practice squad player. And when all of those guys on Tuesday get dumped, keep in mind, no team has the ability to like sort through everybody, right? Like it's a flood. It goes 90 to 53. So yeah, Bo Richter could have a future. I don't think there's a need to protect him on the 53 on Tuesday.
I totally agree. And he's the kind of guy I think that would project, to your point, to be able to filter through that waiver process. I mean, like the teams, when they have the data on the guys in the NFL, you have a clearer distinction of your opinion of him. The guys from the most recent draft class, you're going to be going off your evaluation during the pre-draft process. Yep. None of them drafted Bo Richter. So I do think that you have the shot to get him through. My next one, I'm probably higher on his odds than others. That's Dallas Gant. I'm at 32% on Dallas Gant. There's two reasons I think he's got a real shot here. Number one, the off-ball depth with the Vikings is terrible. And number two, Dallas, the special teams utility with Dallas Gant, particularly in this reality where the Vikings just had to release Najee Thompson with the injury designation, might open up the door for the special teams coach to be banging the table. Gant was a really good special teamer in college. Unfortunately for Bo Richter, he didn't do much of that in college, which might hurt his odds here when we get down to the last couple of roster spots. Dallas Gant does. You can trust that kid to go in on your special teams units. I think that helps, and being the more traditional off-ball linebacker, that helps as well.
And he I think it was the first game against the Raiders. He had a great PFF grade. Like, and I know that's not the be-all and end-all, especially for preseason games, but interesting one. So are you saying he could be sort of the Troy Dye replacement?
Yes.
Because he was really good on special teams.
For sure. Yeah. And that's what I think. And I think, both, that special teams utility. And then this is also a kid who at least isn't going to embarrass himself on the field at linebacker. People know he came from Toledo, but before that, he was a top recruit at Ohio State. And then, it's no shame to not get on the field at Ohio State in their linebacker room. Then he goes to Toledo, and he was really, really good. And, of course, taught himself along the way how to be a key cog in several different special teams units.
Interesting. All right, next up.
Next up for me is Taki Tamani. The last name pronunciation.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Close enough.
That's correct.
Taki Tamani.
Now, I do think that this is another practice squad guy, but I also think that we got a puncher's chance here because of what he's shown in the preseason. Not athletic, but what he is, it's the hard charging downhill, the power game. He's good against the run. He will occupy. He can also do a little shedding. And then you're basically confined right now to the bull rush as far as that goes. But he's got some power to him. He'll push people back. So I think this is a developmental play for the practice squad. But this kid impressed me. I was not as high on him in the pre-draft process. He's definitely opened my eyes in camp. And I think that he is making the case for the Vikings. At least keep me on that practice squad.
All right. Well, you know what? Sorry, Declan, go ahead.
Taimani. Taki Taimani. Tiemawnee in the pronunciation. God bless the Vikings Media Center for having this. Taimani.
Shout out to the Vikes.
You were very close. You know what? Thor is going through a list of guys right now. Some might make it, some might get cut. But let's say you look outside and you're considering cutting your deck. That's right. Your deck's getting old. Your deck is tired. Your deck now needs to be jettisoned. Well, have I got the fix for you folks? Sports Dad wants to tell you about his friend at uglydeck.com. They are on a mission to rid the world of all those ugly decks, those decks that should be cut. Look at the decks right here. Book a free deck estimate this month. Get 3 free footings included if your deck just needs a facelift. Get up to $1,000 off installation or a DIY deck package. For the DIYer, Ugly Deck can install your footings and ledger and save you from the mess and frustration on the hardest part of building a deck. Half of all Ugly Deck customers have never framed a deck before, but with a free coach and their DIY Video Academy, you can do it. If you want the top carpenters and maintenance-free decks to build your entire deck, they build year-round, so book a free estimate today for a new deck. Go to uglydeck.com, uglydeck.com. And Declan, once you're done with the deck, let's say you want to go golfing. Where should you go?
Yeah, I end up driving a lot off the deck sometimes because I'll shank a drive here and there. So I do that at the Meadows at Mystic Lake. Go to golfthemeadows.com to book that tee time. Quick little drive down south from the Twin Cities metro area, or if you're coming up from the south, stop at the Meadows at Mystic Lake. Have those clubs ready. Book that tee time by going to golfthemeadows.com.
Hey, Thor, I didn't get on Taki. What was the percentage for him to make the team?
I have him at 22%.
Okay, 22%. All right, so we're through 5 guys so far. Who's next?
This next one, I would have been more than double the percentage a couple weeks ago than I am now, and that is Gabriel Murphy. Obviously, was drawing a lot of hype at the beginning of camp. This undisclosed injury thing is weird. I need some more info on that, but it obviously stopped the rise of his star during camp, and we've hit a little bit of an impediment there. As they say, you can't make the club in the tub. I'm going to give Gabriel Murphy a 17% chance to make the roster as a healthy participant in week 1. But if it was adding the odds of either we're going to stash him on IR and hide him there, and the odds of sneak him through onto the practice squad, then it would go way, way up. I do think Gabriel Murphy will be in the Vikings organization this season, but the odds that he is a healthy participant on the week 1 roster, I think, have plummeted.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that they end his season and just stash him.
Agreed.
Because so the rule has now changed. Prior to this year, if you put a guy on the IR before the cuts or the day of the cuts, he was done for the season, and then you had a chance to change the roster around and put a couple of guys on IR and bring them back. Well, you can now put 2 guys on IR the day, and it's Tuesday, that the roster is cut from 90 to 53, Thor. And one of those for sure, TJ Hawkinson. I don't think you're going to use the second one on Gabriel Murphy. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. So I think they end his year, but at least then he's still around the team. It's a redshirt year because he was flashing. But you're correct. I don't think they've ever come out and said what's wrong, which is sort of weird. Like ordinarily, they don't tell you a lot, but they will say, well, it's an ankle, right? Or it's a knee or something like that. It's very odd that we don't know. But I don't think that they paid him all of that money to potentially lose him either. So I think that you're probably landing in the right place for Gabriel Murphy.
Yeah, and you, if you can hide him for that year, however, whatever mechanism you use to do that, you can help him work on the thing that he needs, which is building up his body and trying to figure out how to anchor against the run. That kid is really, really good off the edge when it's the passing downs, because he has this special knack for timing the exact millisecond where the ball begins to get snapped. Yep. At UCLA, it was all the time. It was like there was several sacks he had where it's like, all right, we got to rewind that because he definitely jumped off sides. And you would see like the second the center's hand starts to move, he's coming downhill. And there would be tackles that would just totally miss him. That part, Flores is going to love that part. But he has the short arms. That's one of the explicit stated reason why he fell out of the draft. So you lack the length and then you lack the bulk. When it's a running down, that's where we need to improve that stuff. Figure out, we talked about this a little bit ago with Richter. Figure out how can we get your feet in the dirt and then just hold your ground on that. Can we get your body big enough and strong enough where that would even be viable? I think that's what you're doing with him this year.
Jeshaun Jones. What do you like from Jeshaun Jones? He caught a couple preseason touchdowns here. He's looked a little strong. What do we think about Jeshaun Jones, Thor?
I have him as 1% to make the roster. I do think he has some skill and he's not a bad athlete, and even though the Vikings don't have great receiver depth, they have this quagmire of wide receiver 4s and 5s, essentially. Correct. Like a bunch of them, right? And correct. Those guys have to be 3 through 5. Do they keep a 6? Either way, I think Jones is almost assuredly on the outside looking in, unless something happens here, where a receiver would get injured or whatever. But if you're going to keep 5, Jefferson, obviously, and Addison locked in. Naylor is locked in, I think. And then you have Lucky Jackson and Powell. That's before you even get to like the Surefields of the world. I just don't see how Jones is able to crack into that, again, barring injury.
Yeah, and Jones, it's weird. He flashed at times in training camp, and then when the exhibition games came, he was a fourth quarter Jaron Hall guy, which tells you that he's not going to make the roster. I bet he's a practice squad guy. Just to backtrack for a second, I think they keep 6 receivers. I think they keep Powell, Tristan Jackson. I think Surefield, I think they signed him because he's a special teams guy and he can block. So I think he makes it. He stopped and talked to the media a couple of days ago too, and acted like he knew that he was on the roster. But they kept 6 a year ago, and I don't think O'Connell's going to skimp from that position in particular. So I think it goes back to 6. But yes, Jeshaun Jones, to me, ideal practice squad guy.
Agreed. And I think probably what, I wonder if what he was expressing to you was indicative of, I'm going to be on the team this year, maybe not the active roster. This is another guy that projects to get through waivers. I would be very surprised if he got claimed. Yep. Why not stick him there and then try to develop him and hopefully bolster the wide receiver depth going forward? Gotcha.
Who's next?
Next for me, so I don't have anyone else where I give them a percentage. Okay. 0% on Trey Knox. I just think you're caught on the wrong end of the numbers game there, even with Hawkinson being out. And then when you try to think of like, oh, well, could they keep a developmental one? They run a bunch of 12 personnel, so you have to keep the extra backups. Could one of them be the developmental one? I think he starts to lose that argument, whether it's to N'Keal Harry, even Sammy Reyes, who a couple of years ago tested like this crazy freak. Obviously he doesn't know the sport as well. But like when you're trying to parse the differences between these guys, I just don't think Trey Knox acquits himself well. So I don't think he's making it. Along the offensive line, you have Nestor, you have Flax, a couple of those guys. I think those guys are practice squad, are headed to at least one of them. You keep on the practice squad. I don't see either of them making it. The Vikings all of a sudden have a potential numbers problem at the offensive line, which is nice, but I sort of think we're going to get a surprise cut along the offensive line. But even despite that, I don't think Nestor or Flax make the roster.
Dalton Reisner, in my opinion, is gone.
Yeah, agreed.
He's not going to make the team. Look, I mean, I think that there might have been some, shall I say nicely, miscommunication, because I think Dalton expected, and the Vikings going into training camp talk like, well, he's going to come in and battle Brandel. Blake might start, but he's going to, Dalton, first day of training camp, said that he was told You're the backup right guard, and you're going to, vie for that spot. Dalton told me that day, I never really played right guard. And then he got hurt, and we haven't seen him since. So I don't even know if it's a surprise, but I think that there might have been, how can I say this, a perception from the player that didn't equal the reality from the team. And Blake Brandel, flat out, is going to be better in the run game, run blocking, Thor. So, yeah, I don't think Dalton, I don't know if he plays with a team. I'm almost certain it's not going to be the Vikings.
Yeah, unfortunately, I love Reisner at Kansas State, and he had a couple good years coming out as well, but we might be getting near the end there. There has been the injury stuff that has nagged him. You have the issues with run blocking now that you were alluding to, and he's a weird personality proposition because he seems like a good dude, but then there's always been these communication issues, right? Like there's been stuff with the staffs in the past. There was the reason the Broncos didn't want him to come back because apparently he got in a fight at the end of the year with someone in the locker room. Yep. I don't really know what's going on with all that, but like if you're at where he is at in his career, you really need to be like the leader, rock. We can rely on you. There will be no miscommunication. Like it's on you to make sure that there's no miscommunication. I don't know if that's the guy that Dalton Reisner is. So I think that, yeah, we might be nearing the end there.
Yep.
All right. So are we already looking ahead for next year's draft prospects, or is that what we're doing here on Thorsday too?
Yeah, let's hit them.
Love it.
And I'm just going to tie my comments into Mike Tannenbaum and that stupid Russell Wilson thing to start us off here, because Tannenbaum was suggesting that the Vikings trade, I think what he said was a third-round pick for Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
Right now, the Vikings have 4 projected NFL draft picks in the next class. That includes the third-round comp. You still have your first, and outside of that, you have 2 fifths. The idea that the Vikings would trade one of these 4 picks for a guy that would not project to add much to the 6.5 win total over what you're getting with Darnold, even 1 or 1.5, right? You still aren't making the play. The idea is absurd. This team is building for the future, right? You're pick poor already. Why would you give up that asset? And if you wanted Russell Wilson badly enough, why wouldn't you have kicked the tires when his price was free? Right after he got cut by the Broncos, any team could have signed him for, what did he get, like $1 million? Because the Broncos, with the way that the signing bonus worked out and whatnot, like he took less of the base salary, whatever. You could have had him for free a couple months ago. They wanted Darnold. That's why they went out, and got him, whatever. And they need those picks. And Wilson wouldn't move the needle anyway. As far as the next draft class, which I'm already very, very interested in vis-a-vis the Vikings, because of where I think they'll be picking. Probable top 10. I hope they prove me wrong, but that's where I think the Vikings will be. And this, teased this last week. This upcoming class, the last one was awesome at quarterbacks, receivers, and offensive linemen, especially tackles at the top. This one, we switched the other way. Everything is cyclical, and the NFL draft is especially so. This class, lower in quarterback talent, a little bit lower in receiver talent, although the top 2 are studs, certainly lower in offensive line talent. It is way up on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, we broke a record by having the first defender not come off the board until number 15 when Latu got taken by the Colts. And, of course, then Turner came off the board and a couple cornerbacks shortly thereafter. But this coming season, you're going to see a top 10 and a top 15 that is absolutely loaded with defenders. This is very good news for the Vikings, a team that desperately needs difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. The one other position that the 2025 class is ludicrously stacked at is also good news for the Vikings, running back, right? So I think, like, if you're looking at this coming season and then the future of the roster construction, can Darnold play well enough where he signs with someone else to give the Vikings a comp pick back? Can Aaron Jones play well enough on his 1-year deal to go out and garner an offer that will get the Vikings a comp pick back? But if I assume that Jones, this is going to be a one and done, and again, hopefully he plays well enough where he can garner that, where the Vikings can get a pick back. But in the next class, you can get a starting running back late on day 3. I ardently believe with the depth of the running back class.
Wow.
That third-round comp pick, I think you will get an immediate starter in the NFL just because there's so friggin' many of those guys. The last couple RB class, especially last year, it just wasn't as good. We have, I mean, friggin' Ohio State has 2 starting NFL running backs on their roster right now, and Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. I love Jaden Ott, a kid from Cal, going to the ACC. I could go on and on, and I'll film office and stuff. Could go on and on and on. But just keep that in mind for the middle rounds. Now, the first round is, of course, of the most interest, and you have real game-flipping defenders. The one, if the Vikings were to be in the top 10 and not move out, and this would be a big what if, because if they do have a pick with that kind of value, you're certainly going to at least explore trade possibilities to flesh out your pick allotment, right? Like, right now, I mean, you got no pick after that first one till at the very end of the 3rd round, and you're even on day 3. So you will consider it. But if the Vikings stay there, I brought this name up last week. My number 1 guy for the Vikings is Travis Hunter from Colorado, because he is a lockdown cornerback 1 on the one side. Has all the ball. I mean, his ball skills are absolutely crazy. And you see the wide receiver in him on the defensive side of the ball. He was the number 1 overall recruit 2 years ago, initially committed to Florida State. Deion Sanders got him in the most stunning moment, in my opinion, on signing day history, got him to flip to Jackson State in the FCS. Of course, then they went up to Colorado. So now the concept's been proven at the Power 4 level. Hunter, of course, also starts at wide receiver for Colorado, and he's a star when he's out there on the field at wide receiver. But last year, you saw him get injured. Now, that was a fluke. It was a late hit by a Colorado State kid. They were a bit salty. But I think in the NFL, you're not going to start the guy both ways. What you're going to do is you'd make him your cornerback 1, and then you could situationally use him 15 to 20% of the snaps as your wide receiver 3. The Vikings do not have a difference-making wide receiver 3 or anyone that they have the impetus to try to shove out onto the field. You bring Hunter in, you pair him with Jefferson, you pair him with Addison, Hawkinson back fully healthy, and that starting running back potentially that you take in the end of round 3 in this coming class. J.D. McCarthy has everything around him. The offensive line, we've talked about that, is the best it's been in a decade for the Vikings. So now everything's coming together there, and you've also addressed your CB1 need as well in Travis Hunter. So he's my top dude for the Vikings.
Wow. What is your what's your assessment, speaking specifically again on the defensive side of the ball, defensive tackle? What's your assessment?
Yeah, so this is another fortunate thing for the Vikings is this class is loaded at defensive tackle, the interior defensive line. Mason Graham from Michigan is someone who's in the top 5 overall on a lot of too early industry boards right now. He's an absolute stud, was one of the crux points there in the middle for that championship Michigan defense that held teams to like 10 points per game last year. Yep. So he would be someone to consider. Will Johnson's a cornerback on the same Michigan team that is also going to be a top 10 overall type guy. So everyone out there, you have to keep watching Michigan, even though they're not going to be quite as good overall this year, but they have this stud defenders. The guy that I brought up last week, vis-a-vis the defensive tackle need, Deion Walker from Kentucky, because I think he might even be a little bit better than Jordan Davis from a couple classes ago in terms of the planet-sized, knock the heads together destroyer in the middle.
Love it.
Evan Pace will be begging this team to take Walker, because Walker, he just goes out, grabs both the offensive linemen, like, you're not moving on this play. And then it allows the linebackers to just flow. And then Walker is also, for a 6 foot plus, 350 pound plus, just monster. He's way more athletic than he should be. I mean, he both has pass rushing moves outside of the just the bull rush, but he also, on a couple of snaps, they dropped him back into coverage because Kentucky is crazy like that. And one play, the receiver's coming across the middle. The offense doesn't realize that Walker has dropped back into the intermediate. The quarterback throws this guy the ball, leads him right into this 350-pound mutant in the middle of the field. Walker just blasts this kid. I think he realized, like, right before the ball got there, like, oh, crap, because it's like you're standing under a cruise ship. Then he gets the life blasted out of him. The ball pops up in the air. Kentucky grabs it and runs it back for a pick six. That kid can do a whole lot. And for a Vikings defense that, of course, the interior is not very good, but in that sort of system that they play, if you can get that dude over the center, that nose guard type that can occupy multiple guys on a play, and you can also do different stuff with him, I think that would be a great fit at an acute position of need.
I'm excited for the draft, and it's a year away, basically. Good God, it's months away. Thorsky, great stuff. Again, plug your stuff as well, because I know that you have changed to Fantasy Life and also do a ton of things outside of Purple Daily.
Yeah, at Fantasy Life right now, just finishing up my conference previews for college football, where I go team by team, give my win projection for that team compared to the Vegas total, and then whether I'm going over or under. I have adjusted spreads that my system has and win expectancies for every game on the schedule. So even people that don't bet, you can go in there and get a sense of at least where my numbers are on your favorite team. So that's something to look at. And then we started 3 times a week shows there at Fantasy Life. We're going to be doing a live Saturday show that starts locally here at 9 a.m. every Saturday, going through all the games, making our picks, making our prop picks and everything like that. Then we have an early line show on Mondays where we go through, look at the board, where can you get value? And then later in the week, we have a Dynasty Dash Devy show. And the reason it's Dash Devy is because I wanted a thing with there where we talk about some of the draft prospects as well as the young players in the NFL. So check all that stuff out on Fantasy Life and the Fantasy Life YouTube channel.
Dude, you are awesome, and this is one of my favorite times of the week because I always learn stuff. So Thor, thanks much. Dex, I believe that we are now bathed in football and pigskin.
Oh my God!
What else do we need to know?
If any listeners, I know Thor's got the great setup. I don't think he can even fit a TV on that wall behind him, but I know he's probably loaded with TVs. And if you want a TV, go to the Score North app and register in the listener rewards for your chance to win a Roku TV as well. We got football season. This is Thor's Christmas starting next week, right? College football season's coming up. NFL season just right after that. Thor doesn't leave his house Saturday through Sunday. He just sits and he waits for more and more and more football. So be like Thor and go get your chance at landing a Roku TV. Thorsky, we'll talk next Thursday, buddy. Great stuff, dude.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Love it.
Purple Daily. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.